Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Athenianos podcast. I'm here with William Hamilton,
Hello, everyone.
Philip Karaivanov,
Hello.
and Anshan Lee.
Hello.
Today, we're going to be discussing the skeptics, particularly the ancient Greek skeptics, although we might venture into more modern and Enlightenment skeptics if we feel the need to. But I think to start, we should kind of read a statement that summarizes the skeptic aims and position. So if you guys don't have a problem with this, I will go ahead and read this quote from Sextus Empiricus, kind of outlining the main points of skepticism. So here we go. Skepticism is an ability to set out opposition among things which appear and are thought of in any way at all. An ability by which, because of the equivalence in the opposed objects and accounts, we come first to suspension of judgment, that's key, suspension of judgment, and afterwards to tranquility. And it says, later, the aim of the skeptic is tranquility in matters of opinion and moderation of feeling in matters forced upon us. So, guys, the idea I take to be is you have the equal pollens, right? Equal cases for two opposing opinions. Uh, essentially, you're unable to figure out which one is correct, so you suspend judgment, and that is somehow you reach tranquility that way. What do you think of that?
Yeah, so I think it's important to distinguish between different kinds of skepticism. So in the ancient philosophy, and Sextus Empiricus is the Pyrrhonian school. So it's going to be a lot different to the kind of normal kind of skepticism you get, where it's like, whoa, what if you're a brain in the vat? Imagine that everything is fake, which is going to be a bit different. The Pyrrhonian skepticism is more about suspending judgment and not getting attached to positions, which has more merit, I think, than the, I guess, normal skepticism understanding. So obviously there are situations in which suspending judgment is probably a good idea if you don't know enough about it, or if you're just not confident enough in your answers. And usually, at least for me, I've found where it's like suspending judgment is usually a point of the fact where I just like don't really care about the discussion that's being had. I'm just like, I mean, if these guys are true, does it really matter to me? I don't really care, whatever. So that's, I think, when suspending judgment is gonna come in. But yeah, I don't know about you.
Yeah, I'm in agreement that this is a Pyrrhonian skeptical outlook. I really like this statement because it summarizes basically the three tenets of Pyrrhonian skepticism as far as I see them. You see in the beginning he talks about opposition. So that's this idea of antithesis where you have two opposing views. And we will, I'm assuming, get into this later, but there's these arguments or modes that the skeptics like to present, which always put two things in opposition to each other regarding any topic, and then they say that this shows that you can't decide which one is true or not. And that's what goes into Aposhe, which is the second part there, where it says that you should suspend judgment, which they believe leads to tranquility. And it's interesting because tranquility is their main goal. So if you compare it to, for example, Socrates, you could say that he was also skeptical in a sense because he would inquire into what these concepts mean, like justice and love and so on. But for him, it was more trying to find the truth.
Yeah, truth is
at
the
the
main
end of it.
goal. Well, it's
Exactly.
interesting how it basically becomes an ethical position then, for the skepticism, because like to maintain tranquility, kind of. It's a
Yeah, it's because
self help kind of
they
stuff.
don't think there is a truth to be found,
Oh
right?
yeah,
Or
yeah.
or even if there is, they don't think it's possible that you could get to it. So that's why their goal turns more into tranquility, which you would be familiar with this idea of tranquility because it appears in a lot of other Hellenistic schools like the Epicureans or the Stoics even.
Yeah, of course, all of our listeners would be familiar with all that stuff.
Yeah, of course. Well, Stoicism at least. It's pretty
Well,
cool.
we talked a little bit about Stoic, but well, I could summarize like quickly what it is. But basically, the Epicureans value friendship, and they have this idea of what's called ataraxia, which is about having this tranquility of mind, keeping your mind away from fears like the fear of death, which is the main fear that Epicurus, for example, talks about. And on the other hand, you have the Stoics who have this notion of apatheia, where they want to disconnect themselves.
Detachment.
Yeah, detachment from external things.
Mm.
So yeah, the Pyrrhonists are sort of taking those ideas and that end goal, and they're agreeing with the ethical outlook of both the Stoics and the Epicureans. But they think the way to get there is not to affirm anything.
So here's a question. When you suspend judgment and get to that tranquility, then what? How do you live if you have no opinions or beliefs about certain things? How do you go, how do you choose what to eat? How do you decide when to do something and when not to do something? Is it just a passivity? What's the answer?
Well, I'm kind of, speculating. I'm not sure, to be fair, but it could just be kind of similar to, how someone would imagine the enlightened person to be like, where it's, again, in a sense, detached, I guess, where you're not involved in your decisions, you just kind of make them go with the flow, I guess, to be able.
So is that kind of, because I mean they do say, right, that you have to live by everyday observances. Um, which kind of to me seems like there's two things, right? There's the everyday observances where you just um they say guided by nature, necessitated by feelings, handing downs of laws and customs, and teaching of kinds of expertise. But it seems like even these things, um, I don't know, Philip, what do you think about this? It seems like even these things, you could suspend judgment on these things. You could even go another level in the path toward suspending judgment and reaching that tranquility beyond just um like these everyday observances.
Yeah, well, I think maybe the way you presented their position in the beginning was maybe a bit too strong, because it's not necessarily that you can't have beliefs in things. It's more to do with knowledge, and as we know, that knowledge is justified through belief,
Hmm.
right? So there's quite a lot more that goes into it than just beliefs. So I don't think they reject that you should have beliefs. I think they're just they would say they're unfounded, or they're not as certain as we would like them to be, or we can't know that they're true. So the justified and the true part is what they would consider to be is what their arguments attack. I don't think they
Hmm.
say that you can't just have a belief about things, because so to answer you in a practical way, you can still have beliefs, you can still do things. They just don't want to say that you actually know anything about that thing you're doing.
But so if you didn't, if I have my belief, let's say I consider myself a skeptic. I'm not, but let's say I did, and I suspended my suspended my judgment of things. How then would I have beliefs? Like, because doesn't a belief entail that you think that that thing is true, at least in some sense?
Well, go ahead.
No, no, no. I'm just thinking about if you believe something and you think already makes the assumption that you have true belief, that's a false statement. Because I just in case I can believe that I will pass the exam, doesn't mean that truly I will pass the exam in the future.
Mm.
Or that you're justified in that belief that you would pass the exam. I mean, maybe you just are very confident in yourself, or you think
Yeah.
the exam is not going to be very very hard.
So, what would be an example of a belief where you also suspended judgment?
To suspend a judgment doesn't necessarily means you have to have a belief. You can have no beliefs at all.
Well, actually, I think that's sort of a belief in itself, though, suspending judgment, because that is a position to have in an argument. So it's like not an orthodox belief, but I'd say it counts as a belief.
Well, it reminds me of like agnosticism in religious debates.
Right, yeah, that's
Well,
a
you know-
position, that's a belief that you're still defending.
It's a
regardless.
position, yes, but you're not affirming any given proposition. I think that's
Mm.
what they want to say. Um, so yeah, I think we're just belief is quite wide. I don't think it's as narrow as knowledge is. So whilst you could say I have a belief, but I guess you could say I believe that I don't know whether God exists, for example, but you're still not holding a proposition. So I think they would be
Mm.
fine with that. The skeptics. puranists, at least.
Because they do say, right, we live in accordance with everyday observances without holding opinions.
Well, I mean, obviously, if you take it to the extreme, then I mean that is obviously an opinion of itself. So it's kind of self-defeating if you take the extreme position. You can't have a belief on anything. But I mean, I don't think the puranists would go that far. It's just like on most like kind of, I guess, philosophical questions. It's not really.
Well, it's because they don't even hold that, right? They don't think their position is true in the sense that you don't have any knowledge of certain things. They just say we don't know if we have that knowledge. Because that's their critique of the academic skeptics, right? Because for those who don't know, the academics, which came somewhat before them, they would have argued what's called the skeptical thesis, that it's knowledge or things are not apprehensible, right? Knowledge is not possible of certain things. But then they would also hold that you can know, but knowledge is not possible. And that second part is what the puranists are rejecting.
Anchan, I want to get your take on this particular thing. It's to say that the aim is tranquility is kind of a general, broad statement. What do you think that like, if you this is a tough question, but if you were to put into kind of words what actually like that tranquility entails, what it is when you suspend judgment, what do you think that actually looks like?
That's a very tough question, and it's really very general. How tranquility looks like. If you want me to describe how looks like, then you mean that I need to sense the tranquility. But I think if we suspend the judgment, and in that case, we don't use our sensation ability to sense how tranquility is, but because we are already in a tranquil state. That's some kind of thing that in my mind.
Well, I guess a better question is like, because when I think of tranquility, I'm thinking like just meditation,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But is that what they're talking about here?
I think in a sense, yeah, because it's again the detachment thing is quite related. Because I mean, when it's kind of a critique when you hold like a lot of positions, you're kind of engaged with them and attached with them, and that kind of will cloud your mind for a while. Whereas I guess the idea is that if you don't have any judgment, you're kind of free from these positions, which kind of bind you into thinking in a certain way.
Yeah, it seems to me that there's again that Epicurean plus Stoic kind of take on it, because in what you read here, where it says tranquility in matters of opinion, so you could interpret that as sort of having a peace of mind idea, which is more towards the Epicurean take. And then it says, and moderation of feeling in matters forced upon us. So that would be the Stoic idea of not reacting to external reality, which actually goes back to like the Cynics, for example. Which is an interesting question if you know like characters like Diogenes, for example. If you would say that Diogenes is someone who the Pyrrhonists would say is a
Yeah, he seems
tranquil
pretty
mind.
tranquil. Yeah, not doing much. I mean,
Looks very. It sounds very plausible for me, because to say that the aim of the skeptics is tranquility in matter of the opinion, just like escaping from the real problems in the corporeal world and try to live in this self-meditated state. Sounds very.
It does seem quite like Buddhist to me almost.
yeah, well,
Like just kind of like, oh, I'm just gonna go be a Buddhist monk and go live and no, but do you know what I mean? Like this idea that, and we do know that whatever this guy's name, who was the founder of the Piranian school,
no, Pyrrho.
Yeah,
Pyrrho.
should be Pyrrho. Maybe.
He traveled with Alexander the Great to like India and the and Asia during like the conquest. So it's possible that he took
There's some
back
crossover. Yeah, no,
took
that makes
back some
sense.
ideas.
Do you think, I was just thinking of this now, do you think this is sort of the idea of the happy fool kind of idea? Like I know later on in the...
Like ignorance is bliss kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Like Erasmus, I think, has a famous essay on this, where it's talking about how if you don't have knowledge, then you're going to be happier for it.
Mm.
So it kind of reminds me of that idea.
Well, like it would be better if we were all cavemen still. You know?
Well, this is why
Well, to be fair,
no, but this is why I was kind of thinking about in one of our discussions with Ina, our lecturer, saying like, is he just saying that like, an animal that doesn't really think that much, or that doesn't form a lot of opinions about things, like just a dog that's just going about in the world, like is that the ideal kind of state to be in?
I mean, I can't imagine that is the answer because they emphasize this idea of acting in accordance with nature, and obviously we're not like animals in every sense, at least in the fact that we're theorizing about all these different things. So whilst I would say they don't like the theorizing, they don't like the philosophical debates that we've had so far on this podcast, for instance. But they would probably still acknowledge that you are a thinking thing, right? You have to have you have to do something with your mind, right? I think it's just that that direction of your thoughts shouldn't be aimed at truth or knowledge, because this is something unattainable. It should be aimed at tranquility.
I don't think Ina would agree with you with just what you said. As you can see, she I should just I should not assume she's going to listen this broadcast, but if we are living like an animal in that case and just following the only guidance, like you said, is the basic opinions on those things, then there's no sense of duty at all. We don't have to do some things. Like we don't. She still deliver the lectures to us for the whole 11 weeks. In that case, definitely there's something that is not only guided by nature or necessitated by feelings. Something beyond those things.
Well, to that point as well, do you guys think there's do you think there's actual philosophers who take like a skeptical position nowadays? Because
I was just gonna say, I don't think that Ina is a skeptic.
She's definitely not. Yes.
Well, yeah, of course. But I just mean, do you think there's anybody who, like, there's actual philosophers who take this position seriously? Because I feel like, especially when we had our course on epistemology, for example, there was this attitude that this is something that's helpful, which is more like methodological skepticism, where it's kind of like Descartes' skepticism, where he just uses it as a method of gaining certainty.
Yeah. It's
Do you
definitely
think
something to
anybody
be
accepts
avoided.
this?
Yeah, skepticism is definitely something to be avoided. I mean, it's almost a reduction in most circles. But to be fair, this is again the more radical kind of skepticism, where everything you can't have knowledge. I think Pyrrhonianism is a bit more defendable. But I was gonna say, for modern philosophers, I think the closest one is Secus Empiricus. To me, he reminds me like quite a lot of Wittgenstein, at least early Wittgenstein, with
Early or late?
early.
Really, I thought wasn't it late
Really?
more?
Because Ina brought up Wittgenstein too, and compared it to late Wittgenstein.
Late.
Well, it's because isn't it late Wittgenstein who rejects the certainties he thought he found in the Tractatus?
Yeah, in the Tractatus, isn't it the whole point where all philosophy is just most philosophical puzzles are just language games. No, not language games. It's just problems of language and not problems of actual philosophy. And so, where what the famous quote was, whereof one cannot speak, one should not speak, something like that. So it's like he thinks a lot of times it's similar in a similar vein to Sextus Empiricus, that you should suspend judgment in a lot of problems because they're simply, they're just problems of language, and we'll never find a solution to them.
Yeah, I'm not. Well, I haven't
Could you
read.
give an example when you say that you should suspend the judgment in problems? Because I'm not quite sure whether you're talking about problems of morality or problems of.
It'll be any problem of philosophy. So I mean, one I know Sextus Empiricus at least does is like in time, for instance. There are a lot of different theories of time, and he has in, I don't know, whatever, one of the books, he says that we can't know anything about time because, well, its very nature, it's like contradictory, and so there's no point having any position about the metaphysics of time. Just
then I'm a little bit lost in that in your argument, because in that case, it jumps all the way back. It can, if you argue like that, we don't have to know, and there's no need for us, and there's no possibilities for us to know about time. Then we can change the time replace time with other objects. Like we are sitting here in this room precisely, and we don't have to know everything outside this room. You are saying that we are only now living here, so in this particular moment, so we don't have to know about the time, about the past and future, because we are only present here like this.
No, it's not about we don't have to know it in terms of a pragmatic utility. I don't think that's what Sextus is getting at. He's saying, like, in terms of as a philosophical puzzle, it's unsolvable because we're limited. Our capacity for human knowledge is limited, and we can't know things about metaphysical truths about time. So we shouldn't be debating it at all. That's what you'd say.
I want to
Like we can still have judgments and beliefs on things which we can know, but that's most philosophy I think will be off the table with.
Well, I was just gonna say I want to go back to the idea of Wittgenstein. The reason I was saying that maybe it's more like later Wittgenstein is because he was influenced by people like Bertrand Russell and like the Vienna Circle or like this logical positivism.
Sure. Wasn't that's for early Wittgenstein though?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm referring to him in the terms that I think he was more certain in the beginning, and I think towards the end when he was rejecting these ideas, I think that's where some people compare him to the Pyrrhonian skeptics.
But I mean, the logical positivists have a similar vein in some respects to these positions. When they dismiss metaphysics, for example, they'll say all of metaphysics is nonsense because
the difference between the skeptics we're talking about and like modern skeptics, like maybe the Humean type or the Kantian type, or more specifically the logical positivists, is that they're more what's called like local skeptics.
Yeah.
So they're skeptics about a certain area of philosophy, just as you mentioned. They're skeptical of metaphysics or theology, like certain areas of interest. But they're not global skeptics. They're not skeptics about knowledge.
It's a similar attitude, at least, with that. I think the Pyrrhonians would have with everything that at least the logical positives would have with metaphysics.
Sure, but I think the distinction is important because of the different reasons why they get there. Right? The arguments you would use against metaphysics are different than the arguments you would use against knowledge as a whole. And I think we probably should get to the arguments because I think we're sort of going in that direction. Yeah.
Would you like to present them?
Okay, well, I try and present them. So there's the 5 modes, which are basically the arguments. We're going to go through the Agrippa arguments. So the first one is the argument from dispute, and that's basically the one we've sort of been talking somewhat about already. The idea here is that you basically could have 2 positions that appear equally valid, equally convincing. And for example, like this, we first see with the sophists, like Protagoras. They have these debates where they would listen to, on the one hand, Heraclitus talk about everything being part of flux and change, and on the other hand, Parmenides, who says there is no change, and they would think both sides seem equally reasonable. There's no way to decide between them, so you would just suspend judgment on them. So I think that's the first argument that we have sort of mentioned because of the idea of
opposites. To put it, I guess a reconstruction of the argument might be for any position, for any debate, you can have a convincing argument on both sides. So there's no point having a judgment.
That reminds me a lot of the sophist kind of positions where they were always trying to make they were trying to show that the opposite of what the truth was could also be proven true.
Yeah,
no, they'll go a bit further and just say that
they would
there
actually
isn't...
try doing it, right? They would be like, okay, we're actually gonna try, because they were like, a lot of them were like legal professors or like helping people defend themselves in court. So they would prize themselves on being able to persuade a jury or persuade the people who decide on their fate, even if they think it's not actually the truth that happened. So that's where they get this idea of, well, the person who wins the argument is not necessarily the one who has truth. It's just the one who is most persuasive.
Yeah.
So do you guys think that's like, is that a straightforward, like, slam dunk argument for skepticism,
Well,
or is there some problems with it?
Well, it's not obvious to me that in all cases you can have two equally strong arguments for opposing.
Yeah, it's gonna be pretty rare. And even if it is, there are two equally convincing arguments, that doesn't mean that there's no fact of the matter or that we can't reach a fact of the matter.
Yeah.
It reminds me of an either-or question, like, it can be the case either Moses leads the Israelites out of Egypt or Moses did not lead the Israelites out of Egypt. Can be, but there's only one. But there's only one thing in existence, that is Moses did lead the Israel out of Egypt, because actually for everything, and that's probably I'm debating against the skepticism, because I don't think
Wait,
there's.
I'm just a little confused. Can you help me understand how the
I should not use a Moses example. I should use a more how should I? Because you are saying that it can be the case that for
like A,
like A,
it can be, and it can also be the case that
not A.
not A. Is that what you're saying?
No. I'm thinking that that's what you were saying.
Yeah. That's what the
Yes.
skeptics would
Yes.
say, prove their position that you can have equally strong argument for A and not A.
In that case, actually, let's replace A with a concrete object, like a bottle.
Okay.
If we can't reject the fact that this bottle stands on the table and in front of all of us, so it can't be the case there's no bottle here.
Well, we could if you go far enough with the skepticism. If you go like we're a brain in a vat and so
Yes,
the bottle
yes,
doesn't
but-
exist.
But in that case, there's no need for argument, because we don't need to speak at all. We can't.
How does that follow?
I'm thinking that when you're saying that it can be the case that this bottle is not here,
Right.
and it can also be the case that this bottle is here.
Yeah.
I'm thinking there's actually only one argument, that is this bottle is here.
Yeah, I think that's that we were trying to get at, is that in a lot of cases there is like really only there may be two arguments, but one of them is way stronger.
Yeah, exactly.
Than the
There's-
other.
I don't have reason. Like it's possible that the bottle's just a figment of my imagination, but I don't have any reasons to believe that. Why would I believe that?
Maybe it's just the it's just
Well, maybe we don't have it now. But for example, if we're thinking back in like the ancient times, maybe not the bottle, but let's say I do this,
Thank you.
right? Did everybody see my experiment?
No,
Right.
I missed it. Can you do it
Okay,
again,
okay,
please?
okay. Here we go.
Can you do it again?
No.
How do you
getting
do
too
that, magician? Teach
so,
me.
So what happened
Teach
there?
me your magic tricks.
Like, did it move or did it not move?
Well, I think it moved. Sure.
Right, because for us, like we don't have these debates anymore. But back then, they would have this debate between Parmenides and Heraclitus, and Parmenides would have convincing arguments, and then Heraclitus would have convincing arguments. And I think it's just that even something as simple as this, which seems apparent, when you get into philosophical discussions, a lot of these things go into question.
I would say this dispute argument has more weight when talking about moral issues.
With
like
moral
to relate
issues.
to like relativism, that kind of strand.
Yeah, I think
I think it's the same. It's the same kind of thing though with like all other philosophical issues. There isn't that big of a distinction between ethical discussions.
Let's find out a
philosophical
very
discussions.
strange example, just like driving on the right side or on the left side of the road.
Sure.
So it's against the
everybody
law.
knows it's the right side because it's the right
Yeah.
side.
No,
Ang-
in
Anglos
Britain,
see
people
the-
drive on the
Left side,
left side, and in the continent, people drive on the.
right side. Yeah.
In
So-
the rest of the world, people drive on the right side.
Right, what about Japan?
Well, okay.
No, anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
Japan,
Ansel.
Hong Kong.
See, there's convincing arguments on both sides.
But actually, there's only one way. I can't see actually there's two way, because either because it's not an either or question. It's about driving.
Wait, what's the
Well, sure, but that's not a contradict. That's not a P or not P, because we're talking about like circumstances in which country you're driving.
Yeah, are you talking about like an ethical issue of like which side of the road should we drive on?
No, I'm trying to find example for you to.
Yeah, okay, so I got an example. Should we execute prisoners?
All right, yeah. I mean,
You could make a strong argument that we should
yeah.
execute prisoners, and you can go very far down, but you can also make an equally strong case that we shouldn't execute.
Yeah, I think one of them will probably be better than the other, given enough
Well,
examination.
This is what I think we should actually focus on. Instead of these examples with like things that seem obvious to us, I think we should focus more on a, let's say, like friendly example for the skeptic, because I think they're the real force of this argument.
So you
can be
want to go
felt.
to like
No, this example
Okay.
was good, but if you want like something like, for example, does God exist, or
I thought you were gonna we were gonna go more to
well, or do we have free will? We had that discussion last time.
no,
I
I
mean,
was
Ethical stuff.
ethical stuff. Like
Yeah, I mean,
Ethical.
I don't know, capital punishment. What do you mean? Like lots of stuff.
abortion.
Sure.
right. So I
There
Is
think
it
I
allowed
think the
to talk
question.
about those things.
Yeah, we're not talking about anything you want. You will get the capital punishment if you talk about them.
I remember Philip warned me a few days before that there's something that's still forbidden to.
Yeah, you're not forbidden here. At least.
Please continue. Yes, about capital punishment.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Well,
The skeptics.
before we go into the actual capital punishment, no, I was wondering though, like if you take these examples of abortion or capital punishment, which are like controversial matters, and you could say there's convincing arguments for the sake of argument, but it's like, how would you respond then when it's not so obvious, like it is in the case of whether the bottle is here or not? Would you say this argument is stronger, or would you say there's still something that you're pretty confident, like, no, I could decide. I know there's like a sizable population that disagrees with me, and they have their own arguments, but I will still accept my own.
Well, I think they would say, let's say there's two cultures. Culture A has done capital punishment, and culture B has the tradition of not doing capital punishment. I think the skeptics would just say, well,
there's no
if
fact
you're
of the
in
matter.
culture A, you do the capital punishment and you don't think about it, and if you in culture B, you don't do the capital punishment and you just keep going.
Sure, but is there a way that we could know which one is correct?
Then in that case, skepticism would abandon your question, because there's no argument about truth or falsity. They are all correct.
Well, I'm not asking a skeptic. I'm
cool.
asking you guys who are presumably not skeptics.
Yeah. How do we know which one is correct?
Yes. So how would you respond to this argument, given like an actual serious example?
I mean, I think it's interesting because if you think about like a court of law, right? What happens is kind of similar to like the sophist in a way. I mean, yes, it's about evidence, but it's also about
Presentation.
how well you present the evidence. Is what decides.
Well, that's why the more expensive your lawyer, the better defense you're gonna have.
Well, there's also this idea of beyond a reasonable doubt, right? But but it's not certainty, right? They're not
I'm
asking
not sure,
for
like
certainty.
capital punishment, if we're gonna reach like whatever you just said.
I mean, you can be fairly certain, I think, on any moral issue.
Well, that's my question. Like, what do we mean with like how certain? Because I'm reading here, and this is really interesting. They say that P is certain only if not P is impossible. Now, like if we accept that, then the argument is pretty straightforward. Obviously, we're saying that in these positions, the other position isn't impossible, because
this will be
good reasons for
there's
it.
nothing that's going to be like impossible. And if you really, again, the skeptic, if you can go really far with, like, if he really wants to doubt everything, the only thing, I mean, goes to Descartes, obviously. The only thing that'll be not be impossible is like, I don't exist, I'm not thinking.
I don't think I will reject that P is certain only if not P is impossible.
Yeah, this is what I was asking. Like,
it's like what they're using as
criterion?
certainty is like, it's just like, that's not what we mean when we talk about it. Nobody requires this amount of certainty. It's like the skeptic will always, this is one of the things, the skeptic will always like kind of point to the fact like, oh, you can't be certain that we're not brains in the vats. And it's like, sure. You can't be 100% certain, trivially so. But there's nothing really.
I guess my question, to make it more specific, is: would you say that this argument, places too high a standard for knowledge.
Yeah, of course. Like that's not what we mean when we talk knowledge. When we use the word knowledge and when we talk about, even certainty, although technically that would mean 100%, but that's just not what we mean when we're talking about it. It's kind of, I think it's a bit dishonest when the skeptic does it. So it's like we can't have knowledge, but nobody's talking about knowledge in terms of absolute 100% certainty.
Well, there's another question here that I just thought of. Maybe you could even ask, even a Pyrrhonist, you could go back to them and ask, are you certain that you don't know?
No.
And I guess they would say, I don't know again. But it starts to seem kind of interesting that
I think
they're not even certain about that.
no, I'm not certain that I don't know, but I'm also not certain that I do know. And so therefore I suspend my judgment on the particular issue.
Yeah, and a lot of people say that skepticism is self-refuting with the, like, you can't know anything for certain, but then that statement itself, for certain. But I've never really bought that. I mean, I think you can hold it without it being self-refuting. I just think it's, again, as I was saying, it's just like trivially true.
At least the way the Pyrrhonists are presenting it, because
yeah.
the academic skeptics do hold the position that you just cannot know these things. That's the distinction between, there's like first order skepticism, which is about things in the world or like about different areas of inquiry, and then second order skepticism is like, do you know that you know, right? That's like the second order question that the Pyrrhonists are answering no to.
And here's another thing, like, are they saying that the suspending judgment is eternal, or like can there be a case where, let's say, P and not P, in a particular instance, time A, you do have equal arguments for P and not P, but in time B, there becomes a lot more evidence for P than not P. Then are you forced to still suspend judgment, or would they grant that you can move toward accepting P?
I think I've heard responses to this. I think the way they would respond is say that the fact that the evidence has shifted as time progresses, they would use that as evidence for their position that you weren't certain back then and you still cannot be certain, because I think they would just say that the evidence could
more
shift
evidence
again.
for not P would reveal itself, and that it would shift back.
This is sort of, it's not exactly the argument that we were discussing, but I think it goes into another argument. Is this idea that our opinions continually change and evolve as new evidence comes in, and sometimes we believe, in certain ages we believe one thing more than another, and then that changes. So they would just say that you can't be certain because it would change again.
I guess that's particularly true when you think of the history of science and the way we've moved in our theories of certain things in physics and chemistry, right?
Well, I don't know if that's like the best example, because like I guess someone could respond, they're not fluctuating. It's more like you're progressing towards something. But you've got instances where you believe one model, then it changes to another, then it changes again, and given a sufficient amount of time, I think they would just say that you would reverse back to something else.
Well, like you would say, like, I guess that's true, but
I mean, it's more for morality, as you were saying. Like, that could be applied a bit more because there it's at least less clear that there's.
But so, like, think about like, I guess think about like phlogiston, right? Which was
phlogiston, oxygen.
The oxygen, and then that became the
competing theory. There was a competing scientific theory of what air was made of.
So yeah, basically their point would be, how could you be certain that what we know about oxygen now is true when we were so certain before, and then it turned out false?
Yeah.
But that's a separate argument from this one. Because this one is talking in the moment. You have two opposing views.
Again, for me at least, I always just kind of think about it like it's trivially true. Like, sure, we could be wrong, but I don't see why that should affect any of my positions. Like,
can I just go back to your original statement that you're thinking that in the present there's P and not P? It's possible that there's P and not P both exist, as in both have convincing arguments to stand back of them and to let people believe. And in another possible world, or in the future, or parallel exists. Do you mean in the future or parallel exists?
I meant it like when I was talking about temporally, like so the future. In one moment in time, you have two equal arguments for P and not P, and then another period of time later, time B, you have more evidence or you can make a stronger argument for P than not.
So if I would like to argue against skepticism, I would say in that case, it cannot be the case P and not P both exist. That's an empty set because it contradicts the law of contradiction. We can't have both. There's a full bottle. There's a bottle full of water and there's a bottle with no water.
Well, I don't think they would.
It's an epistemic claim. It's not a metaphysical.
Yeah,
claim. So let's just say we can't know whether.
I don't think they
whether P
would
or not P
say
is true.
that both P and not P exist. I think they would say that we don't know which one is true.
Right, and as long as both are possible, neither are certain.
Yeah.
That's their idea. And I think what we're having trouble with this argument especially is the idea that we have to be certain in that sense, where something would have to, the opposite would have to be literally impossible. Which I don't think any argument, or very few arguments that argue against an opposing position, argue that it's literally absurd or it's like completely impossible, because normally we notice when something is impossible.
It reminds me example that Kripke wrote. And when I say, let's imagine that we are in a party, and I said,
party.
yes.
Woo.
It looks so stressful. I don't know why. I point someone over there and I said the one with a glass of champagne in his hand looks happy. Actually, there is someone in this party has a glass of champagne in his hand, but he's in the toilet. So he's not.
It's like a get your case.
Yes.
Yes, he's not presented in this dancing room. And actually, there when I point that guy to you, and I said that guy with a glass of champagne in his hand looks happy. That guy is actually drinking sparkling water. So, yes, in that case, there's convincing argument from both sides that either that man
Of who you're referring to.
Yes.
But you're not justified.
But the truth,
would you say you're justified in believing in that belief?
No, I'm saying that when you're talking about it can be the case both P and but not P have convincing arguments. We are just debating about the fake situation that there's one with champagne in his hand. Actually, there is one, but he's in the toilet. We have never discovered the truth, but we are only dancing on the surface.
I'm not sure if that's.
I'm trying to figure out why the guy in the toilet has champagne in his hand.
He's just chilling, man.
Oh no, let's change the toilet into kitchen. Let's go.
Wipe himself
Let's change it into kitchen, and to say he's going to make some fantastic mushroom soup. Okay, if you want to make some mushroom soups, you need to add some nice champagne inside to that soup.
Right, but the reason I don't think the example works is because it's not a direct contradiction, though. Surely it's just like we're misunderstanding each other. Like if you're debating he's in the kitchen and I'm saying he's actually in like the hall or something, like the thing in dispute.
What are you guys laughing at?
The thing in dispute is really like if you explain it to me and I explain it to you, like, oh, I saw this person, and then you explain your position, I saw him, actually here you were mistaken. I mean, it's not really it's not like a debate on like a single point where there's contradictions. It's more like you're talking past each other.
I think there is a debate because we don't know actually there is one in the kitchen who's going to cook some mushroom soup and have a champagne in his hand. We have no.
What would the actual debate look like?
Just imagine if you are invited to a
would
party.
It not?
You won't go to the kitchen because that's for guests. You don't need to go to the kitchen and to see how those things are prepared. You just stand in the living room. We just like in the case when we are debating, there's P and not P. It's because we are debating the same setting in the living room, and we have actually no access to the kitchen. It's only the master who has access to the kitchen.
Well, okay. This is actually a good example that I could question you guys on in terms of like the skeptical position. Because would they say that it's literally like you cannot know where this individual that we're trying to find actually is located? Because for example, where is he actually? He's in the kitchen, right?
Yes,
but you've seen him like in the hall or something. Okay, so you cannot know where he actually is because him being in the kitchen
who are we talking
is not
about?
impossible.
Some dude.
The host of the party.
let's say
the
we're talking about
host.
you, for example.
Me.
And yeah, you're in the kitchen, but I thought I saw you in like the room next door or something. The idea is that you being in the kitchen and you being in the room, like both are not impossible. So does that mean I cannot know with certainty where you were? I mean, it seems like after some questioning, some people, for example, I could have a pretty good belief of where you
You'll
were.
still never be 100% certain.
You
but
wouldn't be
again,
100%, yes,
that's
but
not important.
we're not
It's
looking
like-
for 100%.
Exactly,
I don't
yeah.
think.
It's feel like skeptics operate in this, weird reality where everyone has got to
think
be
I would-
100% certain on everything in order to do anything. It's just
Well, that's
not the
very
case.
strange though, because even they're not themselves 100% certain of their position.
Yeah. They'll have to concede that otherwise.
Can I just clarify my example?
Sure.
Because I think when you're saying that we are not 100% of the things, I'm not saying that we have any, I'm not saying that we are, when I say that there's a guy in the kitchen who really has a glass of champagne in his hand, and all the other guys that I mistakenly pointed towards in this living room actually are having only sparkling water in his hand.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying that we have no access towards the kitchen.
Sure.
And it's only the master, the host, who has access to the kitchen.
Yeah, I understand that. I was just
So-
modifying the example in order to illustrate if it was like a simple scenario, would the skeptical position start looking a bit absurd? That's
Yeah,
what I was
it makes
explaining.
it makes me think that the skeptics debating about whether that guy has champagne or not in his hand, and later discovered, oh, actually he has he does not have champagne in his hand because he's drinking sparkling water. It's all irrelevant. They're not debating about the truth because that guy might looks happy or might looks not happy. It's irrelevant to the true happiness of the one who's in the kitchen and really has champagne.
Well, I
in his
think
hand.
regarding that example specifically, to me, it seems at least that clearly you're referring to the guy with the sparkling water and you're just confused.
Well, the
Sparkling
question is
versus
also like,
champagne.
what
But
even if the two rooms are like separate, what if I just get up, walk over to him, say, "Hey, how you doing?" and then he turns around and it's William instead. It's like, oh well, okay, I was wrong. Like that's what I meant. It seems like on face value the skeptical position is too hardline. To say that it's impossible to know who the person is in the
But I
room
guess-
because it's possible. The alternative is possible. He could actually be.
I guess going back to
Okay.
the champagne example, you never really know if it's. I guess.
But the master know, the host
Does
know.
he? I guess I'm arguing for the skeptics. Is even he doesn't really know when he's drinking.
Well, the thing is, no one. Again, I was saying this. It's like the skeptic wants to impose like such a high degree of a high
the standard
degree
for knowing
standard
is
for
incredibly
knowing.
high.
Yeah. But it's just like, why should we accept that it's clearly not how we're using knowledge, as you said with your
But
party?
then we could easily get back to the brain in the vat scenario. Well,
Yeah,
which is-
exactly.
we could all be just brain in the vats, and experiencing these things while we're in a machine.
Oh, let me try to
Well-
slightly change the example. Let's imagine we go to a really nice building. We are in the party of the Gatsby. We are
The Ritz Hotel.
yes in Ritz Hotel.
Okay.
Well, like a Gatsby party, the Great Gatsby.
Yeah, it's a great Gatsby. Like we
Okay.
are invited to his party.
So let's-
He's my good friend.
Oh,
New York.
Really?
Whoa.
Good sport.
Yeah.
Daisy is certain married to a man.
Okay.
It is certain that Daisy is married to a man.
Mhm.
No, forgot about Daisy. I don't think it's a very good example. Yes, just I
Which
think
is the big house. The very
yeah,
nice
it's
house.
just a big house, very big house, and there's the second floor, and all the guests have no access towards the second floor. Well, on the first floor, sorry, I always confuse about the first and second. How the floors.
Wait, now I'm confused. Are
We-
we talking about?
Well, if we're going with the British, then it's
Oh,
a
yeah.
ground floor and then it's the first floor.
Yes,
But-
just think that
There's
just
two
all
floors.
the
Two floors.
Yeah, there's two floors. There's ground floor and
The
first
one we walk in and the one above the one
when we walk in, we are only
How about just there's the lower and the upper floor?
yes, the lower and upper. Thank you very much.
There we go. We solved the
So
issue.
all the things that we are debating is on the ground floor, the lower floor. The skeptics are saying, oh, it might be the case and P is, it might be the case and it's not P, and both have convincing arguments. And what we should do is to suspend their judgments and to try to find some tranquility. It's only they are actually only saying that, oh, it can be the case. Then there's champagne glass here, there's orange juice there, and there's blah 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 there. and oh, I'm confused with all those things. I'm not satisfied with all those things. I will just walk out of the party and go to the garden to have a cigarette, or to just stand near a tree and to find myself tranquility. That's my view of.
Okay, well, I think I should bring in the second argument because the skeptics do present these modes, but they're not like as certain about them, just as they're not certain about anything. So when they do give these modes or arguments, it seems to me at least that it's more like a cumulative case where they're trying to just say, look how confusing things are. So I think we've started sort of touching on the second argument from relativity, because we're talking about how things appear to us. And this is again tied to what you said, Ethan, about the sophists, especially about relativism, because the second argument here basically says the same thing. It says that the way an object appears to us, right, is relative to the subject, which is judging the appearance. In other words, the person who's actually having the experience. And it goes on to say we should suspend judgment, however, on what that thing of which we're observing the appearance of, what it's like in nature, what it actually is. So I think this is an interesting, in connection to your example as well, about what it looks like. You have a mistaken appearances, for example. And it also is related to, for example, like a Kantian view of dividing the phenomena from the noumena. The phenomena being that which is experienced in this world by us, and then the noumena is that which is by itself.
The noumena is the things that actually in the upper floor. Thank you. I was thinking, we are only debating about the phenomena, but we can't have access to the noumena. And for the only way that we know what noumena is we go close to the master, we go close to the host of the party, and we ask him how the things are. And the master is the only one who connects, who has the ability to access both the upper.
What if you can't go to the master, though?
Pardon me?
What if you can't go to the master?
Is that what he's saying? That you can't go to the master?
You can.
You can or you can't?
Because you are invited. Of course you can.
So I was thinking of a religious viewpoint.
No. It's like we are born into this world as we are invited by the master to.
But we can't go to the upper floor?
But we can't go to the upper floor.
Don't think Kant will accept that
No,
we're
no,
invited by the master.
We can't go to the upper floor.
We cannot go to the upper floor. It's only the master who can go to the upper floor.
So is this like
It's
the...
only
But is the master not in the upper floor?
You don't know where the master is. God moves in a mysterious way.
This is what I mean. If you don't know where he is, then how could we ask him anything?
The theory of Forbes, but we can't like ever reach the Forbes because they're the upper floor that we can't ever like see the truth.
If you're a skepticist, if you are a Pyrrhonist, probably it just says, "Oh, let's forget about forms. We just suspend the judgment." But there's no need for this kind of argument. Whether you accept or suspend your judgment, the judgment is always still over there. It's always a case that if you go to a party, you know the party is organized by a master. That I came to your podcast, I know this podcast is organized by you. Whether I know you or not, it's irrelevant. I don't know your full name. I don't know where you're from, and I don't know which language and how many languages you speak. I don't know where are you yesterday, and I don't know where you are going to be in tomorrow. But I know if I come here, I know this thing is organized by you. So the skeptic's argument for me is really not convincing. Just say it's just escaping from all the things and jumping backwards.
See, I thought your example actually was trying to defend the
No, I'm
skeptics.
not trying to defend.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
Because, okay, what do you think about this example of relativity then? Because you used also the example of the bottle. So like, okay, we're having an experience of the appearance of the bottle instead of the actual bottle. So like, would you say you cannot know anything about the actual thing in itself?
It's irrelevant for
if there's
me
no
whether
master
I know
that
or
can tell
not.
you.
But I'm certain that there's definitely only one answer. There's only one argument for that, whether that bottle is full of water or not.
I think that Pronicists would say that there is only one, there is a truth and a falsehood. We just don't
We
know
just
it.
cannot know it. Yeah, this
Yeah.
is all an epistemic debate. It's not about the metaphysics of propositions or anything that abstracted. We're acknowledging that there might be a bottle, there might not be a bottle. The question here is just that appearance is distinct from reality.
Right.
I don't think it's an epistemic question. It's a metaphysics. Maybe maybe my mind is. I was reading Kripke.
Yeah.
And I'm not. I'm thinking that actually it's two separate words, and therefore it's a metaphysics question. And using it's in this actual world, and there's only one answer towards whether that bottle is.
Well, I'm not asking does the bottle exist. I'm asking do you know the bottle exists? And if you know, can you tell me how you know? That's the question. I'm not like it's the dispute isn't whether it actually exists or not. The Pyrrhonists don't have an opinion on that, as far as I understood. Like they're not disputing the reality of.
I understand what you're saying, but I do think too, if you're asked the question, does it exist? What you're implying is, what's your opinion on whether it exists or not? Right? If you say, oh, is Jude sitting to my right? I'm asking you, do you think that Jude is sitting to my right?
Sure.
Actually,
What's
you're already expanding the question.
Well, what's the issue with that, though? I'm not understanding what the answer is.
My point is just that my point is that the distinction between asking, do you think this, and is this, is less clear to me than I think you made it out to. Because I agree with you that they're saying yes. They're not taking an opinion on the notion that is on a metaphysical level is the bottle there or not.
Are you saying the distinction between the epistemological and the metaphysical isn't as clear as I made it out to be?
Yeah.
Okay, well, this is how I'll answer. If you could answer, like, if we're talking strictly metaphysically, you could say the bottle either exists or it doesn't exist, right?
Yeah.
There's no middle ground of existence, right? It's not, well, unless we like accept potentiality or something, but that's another thing.
No, sorry.
But then, like, if I ask you, do you know whether it exists? You could always say, I don't know whether I know, right? That's the second order thing again, because you don't want to affirm anything.
Right.
So that's why I was saying that if we're having like a metaphysical debate, we would be arguing for one proposition or the other. But if we're having an epistemological one, the Pyrrhonists could always just go with like the third option, which is just not affirm anything.
I don't know whether I know. Would that be about like the subconscious knowledge or something? Not aware of your own knowledge.
Well, because
So
you
what you're
assume you
getting at?
know, but they would say you don't really know, right?
If I
That's the difference between a belief and a knowledge, or an opinion and knowledge, which is like the Plato distinction. Like you have true opinions, for example.
Don't you think
Sorry.
that when you say the sentence, I don't know whether I know, you already have the opinion, and actually you have the knowledge within yourself, but you reject the fact that you have the knowledge.
Well, I think that's where.
But then, can you say anything without forming an opinion?
But that's where the distinction comes. I don't think the problem is belief or opinion. I think we've had this sort of problem from the beginning of our discussion. Like, we seem to be equating opinion and beliefs with knowledge. So yeah, my point basically is that I don't understand, or at least I don't think the Pyrrhonist is saying you cannot have opinions. He's just saying you can't call them knowledge. So I don't know, like, because we seem to hear we're like saying I have to have an opinion.
Well,
in
no,
order to
it's just
act
the Pyrrhonists say you should withhold judgment. You should withhold having an opinion on a subject. They are saying you should withhold from having an opinion.
Yeah, but you have the opinion that you cannot know certain things.
Right, it's not going to be universal. Like there are a few things, but on the specific topics in which they think the skepticism applies, they'll say you shouldn't have an opinion.
Well, okay, I think we're just not understanding words. You have the opinion of the Pyrrhonists, but that's not knowledge. Like you have the opinion that you should suspend judgment. You have the belief that you should suspend judgment.
But that's not knowledge. Yeah, sure. They would.
You don't know that you should suspend judgment. That's a different thing.
Yeah, sure.
I'm a little bit lost.
I think the Pyrrhonists would say
Well-
they're lost too.
Yes, they would accept that. But this is actually a good point because this is exactly what they want to do with these modes or arguments, right? The whole point is they're saying, well, we don't really know if these are like straightforward good arguments one by one if you analyze them, but if you put them together, you're gonna get confused, and that illustrates the point that you don't know, you're not as certain as you thought you were.
Yeah.
So if you wanna, we could go through the.
Shall we just finish these arguments?
I mean, there's 3 more, although the third and fourth are quite similar in terms of how they're connected.
All right. Well, yeah. Why don't you walk us through infinite regress?
Okay, I'll just read through it and explain it again. So in the mode deriving from the infinite regress, we say that what is brought forward as a source of conviction for the matter proposed itself needs another such source, which itself needs another, and so on ad infinitum, so that we have no point from which to begin to establish anything, and suspension of judgment follows.
So this is like the idea that my knowledge of like X relies on A to B to C to D to E to F, and it keeps on going to smaller and smaller principles, and that continuum will go on to infinity, such that I can never establish that first thing upon which I have the belief.
Yeah,
And we mentioned
it's
this in
kind of
our-
as it's kind of as like when, I don't know, with children, if you ever had this, where you can always go like, but why does where does the tree come from? Is there the tree come from the seed? But where does the seed come from?
Yeah, exactly.
And just
And
go on for it.
We discussed this with the posterior analytics and Aristotle's ideas of demonstration, and if it has to be demonstrated again, then
The
something
route.
else has to come.
The route.
The route, yeah. Well, that was his answer to this. But the skeptics, it seems like here they're taking, like, their first 2 arguments were sort of inspired by the sophists, I think, and
Right.
these here are inspired by Aristotle's observations. And you see later, I think this is connected to Agrippa's dilemma or
The trilemma, the
where
Agrippian Muchenhausen trilemma. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
the-
one of the horns of the trilemma.
because later he gives like 2 other options. The fourth argument is we have the mode from hypothesis, when the dogmat is being thrown back ad infinitum, begin from something which they do not establish, but claim to assume simply and without proof in virtue of a concession. So here's like where you presuppose something, or you suppose, well, there must have been some sort of a beginning thing. We can just suppose it's true.
Yeah, well,
But of course, the skeptic just thinks that's
that's
conceding the
circular.
point.
Yeah.
I think they are just massaging the arguments, but not directly. Directly. I really don't like this kind of infinite regress. It sounds like I should find an example. Like when I say are you Italian?
Yeah.
Okay. When I say you are Italian, and then I say, where is Italy come from? And
Where does
then
it
you say Italy comes from blah blah blah, and probably tracks back to the establishment of the Romans, and trade back to the wolves, and
Look,
Blah, blah,
the
blah.
answer
Well,
is it's obviously Greek, and everything is Greek. And
No,
that's the answer.
But I think the
Yeah.
question is, it's more like how do you know?
Civilize the Greeks.
How do you know this? It's
I'm
not
trying
like a
to argue
historical-
against this because all the things is irrelevant to you than the fact you are Italian. When
Well, okay. This is the contention. That what if he goes backwards and he can never reach a starting point?
actually
How did he even get to be Italian in the first place if there was no starting
It's
point?
not about like
It's
why
not-
am I
it's not about
Italian?
how
That's
we got to
horrible.
Italian.
That's horrible. I think it's like Socrates is a man. Socrates is a philosopher. Like, Socrates might be a woman, probably a perfect-heighted woman.
What?
Never mind. I mean, Socrates is a philosopher, and if we use this kind of infinite regress and to ask about Socrates' body has foot, and that Socrates' foot has nails on his toes, and how that nails is
No,
structured.
I think it would just be about what justifies that belief. How do you know that Socrates was a philosopher? And you'll say,
Yeah, it's not about the components of Socrates.
yeah. It's about
But
the
from-
justification for belief. Right?
But
So
from-
you could interpret this like we've had the debate before metaphysically about infinity when we were discussing the unmoved mover argument, where you're talking about how if it's infinitely regresses back into the past, then it cannot reach the point now. But here it's basically the same argument, but it's running in an epistemological framework where you're saying what's the foundation for your belief, and if you have to keep explaining yourself, then it turns out you don't have any starting point, which means you don't have any basis for what you believe.
The foundation of the belief is now, precisely at this moment, that you sitting in front of me and you tell me you are Italian. And once you tell me you are Italian, I believe you are Italian. It's irrelevant towards the past. Also irrelevant to the
Why
future.
is that justified? Why is that move from me telling you to you believing it justified?
And the answer is because I don't know.
The answer
You're
is
gonna
both-
get your like sense
the answer
perception or
is,
Yeah,
something
exactly.
like
it
that.
might be the case that you are not Italian. It might be the case you're
Right. Why should you believe that I am Italian when I tell you?
Like
you've seen his
fundamentally,
passport.
what do you base your
That's-
knowledge on?
That's the most tricky question, because for my answer is I believe in intuition, and for my intuition, that once you tell me, it's irrelevant towards
Well, we can go further.
justification.
Why should you trust your intuition? Why should you trust your intuition?
Because if I don't trust me, then there's no one else I could hardly trust.
All right, I think
But the issue here is that you're basically getting into this hypothesis situation where you're just saying, this is fundamental for me because I just have to start somewhere, so I'm just gonna suppose this is a good place to start. And as we just read, I think the skeptics would just not be convinced by that. They would just say you're conceding the point. You don't actually have a basis for your belief. You're just making something up. That's the. I'm not saying this is like not a good alternative, but I would say this is how they would respond. They wouldn't be very sympathetic to just posing something like intuition or
Okay.
reason or sense perception.
Well, since we briefly talked about it, the Agrippian trilemma and the Mugenhausen trilemma is basically about justification for knowledge. So that's one of the options is the foundation lists, which you were hinting at, where you just say we have a basis for knowledge and then we work on that. Some things we just know from intuition or whatever. We know logic, we know, well, even ethics if you want to put it in there, but we know induction and all that, and then we just go from there. Then there's the infinite regress, which is, I guess this one's not that popular, but I guess people think that infinite regress is fine, it'll defend it. That's good.
That's basically biting the bullet of the
Yeah.
argument.
They all just justify each other in some weird way.
Yeah.
Or then you can go with the circular route and say at a certain point we just assume, we just assume that induction is real, for example. We just assume that our intuitions.
So related to that, I would just read the reciprocity, which is the last argument,
Sure.
and this is that
That
option.
one, sure.
The reciprocal mode occurs when what ought to be confirmatory of the object under investigation needs to be made convincing by the object under investigation. Then, being unable to take either in order to establish the other, we suspend the judgment about both.
What's the meaning of reciprocity? Looks like I don't know. The
Well,
meaning of that
reciprocity
word.
is when it's like when one
It's
person
like-
helps you and then the other helps you
Yeah,
back.
like I give you my tissue pack, and you give me your tissue pack.
And if
You
you were
have-
to
you
draw
have-
that out, it's
yeah.
a circular motion, so the idea is it goes
Yeah.
circular.
I can't see how these things relate to epistemology.
So the idea is you have it's exactly as you said. So basically the last three arguments are this trilemma where you have like three options for how you could
Justify
found-
knowledge.
justify your knowledge. Like how do you know what you know?
I'm sorry, I'm totally lost by this argument. Would you just tell me to expand what's the relation between reciprocity towards other things in this debate of metaphysics or of epistemology?
Reciprocity is just they're just using that word. It basically means it's circular. So, like for example, if
I think the what's it called, the induction is a good example.
Yeah, so it's like, you know the problem of induction. Are you familiar with that? I was hinting at that before. But...
Probably no. You can briefly explain that?
You know how like
yeah.
you know how like
well, I don't want to use
Yeah.
too complicated an example
but
because we're
basically
short
the,
on
the
time.
way that you
Yeah.
the way that you know the reason you know things from experience is because they've been that way in the past to your knowledge. And the way you can prove that
It's
is by the fact that
appealing to the past, but you can't
appealing to
prove the past by appealing to the past. But maybe a simpler one would, why do you think that like 1 + 1 is 2, for instance?
Why do I think?
Well,
No,
why is that justified? Why are you justified in knowing that 1 + 1 is 2? The reciprocity people
Yeah,
would just say you
okay.
assume it's right. You assume that's true, and you move forward. From
The idea is basically when we were just talking about the why is William Italian, for example. You're either gonna get a bunch of explanation ad infinitum, which would not actually give you a good explanation because you won't have a fundamental explanation for why that is the case. The other option is that you're just going to have to suppose something as the foundation, but that's not good because, well, it looks like it's ad hoc, right? You're just arbitrarily stipulating this is where you start. And the reciprocity idea is that you justify it with the thing that you're trying to investigate. So you say, well, William is Italian essentially because I know William is Italian, which is obviously circular. So they would just reject that on logical grounds.
Okay, I think we're gonna have to
Okay, yeah, we got through the modes. So.
Yeah,
call it
right.
there. But thank you guys.
Thank you, but I
Appreciate it.
Of course, man. Always a
Nice.
pleasure.
Nice
Appreciate
to be
it.
back.
And we'll see you next time. Like, subscribe, follow the YouTube channel, subscribe on this podcast, the
Turn
Spotify,
notifications on.
turn notifications on,
Exactly.
Instagram, do all that stuff. And yeah, see you next time. Bye-bye.